The Shane Beamer era in Columbia, South Carolina started out really well in 2021 and 2022, but last season, well, compared to expectations entering that year, it was a disappointment, and a lot of things went wrong with this Gamecock team last season. And there's a lot of talent that leaves through the portal and to the NFL. However, they supplement that with a lot of talent coming in, and is South Carolina going to be able to turn the ship back around in 2024? You're about to find out what I think here in this video. What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. I want to welcome you to my channel and welcome you back to prediction season. Whether this is the first video you're mine or whatever video this is, I think 58 if I'm not mistaken. Hey, I really appreciate you supporting the channel, supporting prediction season. And if I haven't done your favorite team yet, don't worry. There will be a video for all 134 teams on my channel by the end of the summer. It means I'm doing your favorite team, and it means you should hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you know when that video gets uploaded again. Thank you for watching this and all of my other videos. And there are more ways you can help support the channel if you would like to do so. Liking, commenting, sharing, literally anything else you can do to help support the channel. Literally anything you do to interact with it helps us support it. It does mean a lot to me. Let's dive on into talking about the South Carolina Gamecocks in 2024. But before we do that, you got to know how we're going to do it. We're going to take a deep dive into the team's offense, into the defense, and at the end of the video, we will go through the Gamecock football schedule and we'll give it a game-by-game preview and prediction. But I do have a couple more things I'd like to say before we get started, because right over here are going to be the stats the team put up either offensively or defensively last season. And of course, as usual, for your viewing pleasure, right below the team's logo, I've put the team's coaching staff. So I will waste no more time. Let's get into talking about the South Carolina Gamecocks. You do lose a couple quarterbacks out of this room. Colton Gaither, I'm hopefully saying that last name right, only threw 2 passes last year, so is a depth option that is gone. And we'll talk about the quarterback situation entering this year in a little bit. But you do lose your starting quarterback from last season, the former Oklahoma transfer, who honestly was pretty good throughout his time in Columbia overall, was Spencer Rattler. Now, last season, there was some disappointing performances that he had, but overall had a 3,100-yard season, 3,186 yards to be exact, on 68.9% completion percentage, 19 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. The interception number a little bit high, touchdown number a little bit low, and we'll talk about why that was throughout this video. But you do lose a really talented player in Spencer Rattler, who is now gone to the NFL. So what does your quarterback situation look like this year? Well, Lenore Sellers is coming back. The primary backup last year, again, no one really got a whole ton of playing time besides Spencer Rattler last season. So Sellers was 4 for 4 last year for 86 yards, 2 touchdowns, including a 50-yard touchdown pass. So, hey, and there's a lot to be excited about with Lenore Sellers. He's a pretty solid quarterback that could actually end up developing really, really well for this program. He should be the starter in 2024, but there are a couple of guys that coming through the transfer portal that I think will challenge for that spot in their own ways. Robbie Ashford's coming over from Auburn and Davis Bevel over from Oklahoma. However, I don't see either of them taking the starting job from Sellers. I believe him to be that starting quarterback here in 2024. Let's talk about the running back room from last season. Well, only 85.1 rushing yards per game. The team as a whole only averaged 2.8 yards per carry, but you do lose 2 of your more talented running backs in this room. DeCarrion Joyner, even though he didn't have the best season last year, 120 yards, 5 touchdowns on 50 carries. That's only 2.4 yards per carry. Still a talented enough player, especially in his upside when he's playing well. He is off to the NFL. And your leading rusher from last year in Mario Anderson, who had 143 carries, 707 yards, and 3 touchdowns last year. Well, he has gone through the transfer portal. He has found himself a brand new home, and that of the Memphis Tigers. He'll go be a very talented player over there for that program. So who do you return? Well, Juju McDowell comes back in this running back room, and he's shown a lot of promise during his seasons here in Columbia with the South Carolina Gamecocks. Had multiple 200-yard seasons back in 2021 and 2022. Last year, only 63 yards on 26 carries. But every season he's been with this program has had 2 touchdowns. He should play a bigger role. Maybe, because there's a ton of talent entering this running back room through the transfer portal. Rocket Sanders is one of them. Raheem Sanders, if you want to call him by his actual first name. Everyone calls him Rocket, though. The Arkansas transfer should be that lead back for the Gamecocks in 2024, as he is dynamic. Oscar Adaway and Jawarn Howell are also coming in from respective programs as well. But again, Sanders should be that lead running back for them and should give a little more pop and a little more explosiveness to this run game than what we saw with South Carolina last season. Now, in the wide receiver room, though, I mean, there are a ton of big losses here. You lose two very talented players to the NFL and one extremely talented player through the transfer portal. Not saying the two guys that left to the NFL are not extremely talented, because Xavier Legette and Amarian Brown are both very, very good players. Legette led the team in receiving last year, 1,255 yards, 7 touchdowns on a team high 71 catches. And then Amarian Brown, second most leading receivers among wide receivers from last season, 265 yards and a touchdown for him. But Antoine Wells was the big piece to this wide receiver room, maybe besides Xavier Legette. You can make an argument for that. He went down with injury last year. He is transferred over to Ole Miss. You also do lose Omega Blake, who had 250 yards last season, so that's a pretty notable piece that leaves as well. Wide receiver room, who comes back? Well, Nick Harbor and Luke Dottie, a converted quarterback, come back in the wide receiver room, but you had to dive into the transfer portal to replace all that you lost. And boy, did they get some good ones. Okay, let's talk about them. Jared Brown comes over from Coastal Carolina, very good player over there. Gage Larvaden, he is coming over from Miami, Ohio. You get Vandrevius Jacobs coming over from Florida State. And the biggest name, in my opinion, Amari Higgins-Bruce, coming over from the Louisville Cardinals. So you get a lot of talented transfers into the wide receiver room. You do lose Trey Knox, who was the second leading receiver last year, to the NFL. So very talented piece, lost there at tight end. But you do get Joshua Simon coming back to this team, and Brady Simon. No, my apologies, not Brady Simon. That is Brady Hunt. I doubled up on the last name. 1 second. My apologies for that. I was looking at that and I was thinking, wait, something's not right. Brady Hunt is a Ball State transfer that should come over and play big minutes in the tight end room. So again, a lot of talented pieces coming in through the portal to sort of revamp this wide receiver / pass catching room from what it was a season ago with all that you lost. And on the offensive line, well, you did lose a ton of guys there as well, and pretty much every aspect that you can lose guys. Nick Garguillo, and hopefully I'm saying that last name right, he has gone to the NFL. Jalen Nichols and Sidney Fugar are gone to the transfer portal, and Tri Jones and Tyshawn Wanamaker, well, they have both decided to hang up the cleats, and that football is no longer going to be a part of their lives. So when you take a look at this offensive line, it could prove to be a fairly deep offensive line, but this was the unit that had trouble for this team last season. It's why the rushing game wasn't as good as it could have been, and it's why maybe Spencer Rattler didn't throw for more touchdowns. He got sacked 40 times last year. Ja'Kai Moore, Rashawn Lee, Tree Babalade, Trayvon Baugh, Casey Henry, and Josiah Thompson, big name there, especially that the latter one that I said, are all returning, while Kamar Bell and Aaron Parks, as well as Torricelli Simpkins, they all enter through the transfer portal. So when you talk about this offense, as I will do so really quickly as I kind of rambled on a little bit there, this is an offensive line that has got to take a step up. Yes, it could prove to be very deep, but it has to take a step up from last season. Lonnie Teasley is that offensive line coordinator. I know there are some Gamecock fans and some college football fans in general that just aren't super sold on him. That being said, I think Sellers has some pretty high upside at quarterback. You get a ton of pieces in that skill position room coming in through the transfer portal, as well as some pretty good returning pieces there as well. Overall, if the offensive line takes a step forward, I see this offense doing the same in 2024. When you talk about the defense for South Carolina, well, it too loses its fair share of very talented pieces, especially on the defensive line. We'll talk about them all right now. Tyreek Johnson, he is going to be gone off to the NFL. Very talented defensive lineman for this team last season. Off the edge, 16 tackles, 2.5 sacks. The production definitely could have been higher for him, but nonetheless, he's a very talented player, as you will be seeing him play on Sundays. Jordan Strahan, however you say that last name. Again, I apologize for any mispronunciations. He also came off the edge last year, 20 tackles and 4 sacks. That was second on the team last year. He is gone due to running out of eligibility. He has no more. He has graduated. And Xavier McLeod, who could have been a pretty high upside defensive lineman for them, never really got a ton of playing time, only 1 tackle last season. He is gone through the transfer portal. So who returns on this defensive line? Well, you do get a lot of very talented pieces back. Alex Huntley is back. Tonka Hemingway is coming back. You also do get TJ Sanders, who was the leading tackler among defensive linemen last year. TJ Sanders had 43 tackles, 4.5 sacks. So again, not only the leading tackler among defensive linemen, but your sack leader among defensive linemen as well. And Brian Thomas also returns, but they were able to bulk up pretty well through the transfer portal. Kyle Kennard comes over, Gilbert Edmond, DeAndre Jules, and Monkel Goodwine are all going to provide depth to this defensive line room. Could prove to be a pretty deep room for them in 2024. Stone Blanton and Grayson Howard are two names that leave this linebacker room through the transfer portal. Blanton was a top 5 tackler for the team last year, 52 tackles for him. And then you want to take a look at a guy like Grayson Howard, who was a fairly solid player, 18 tackles for him last season. So who comes back? Well, Debo Williams was your leading tackler, broke triple digits, had 113 tackles, a sack, 2 passes defended. You also do get Bam Martin Scott coming back, but you also get some very talented pieces in through the transfer portal. Demetrius Knight and Bengali Kamara. Kamala, I know, coming over from Pitt. I will get you where Knight is coming from here in a second. He is coming over from Charlotte, a 4-star rated transfer there. Kamara, a 3-star rated transfer, but they both will play big minutes in this linebacker room in 2024. You get some big losses out of the defensive back room, most notably in Marcellus Dial Jr. The junior should be on there, so I apologize. 36 tackles and led the team with 10 passes defended last season, as well as Kajuan Banks. Kajuan Banks, however you say that name, I apologize. He had 8 tackles and interception last year. Again, fairly notable player, but didn't see the field as much as he would like to, so he's off to a new program. And Keenan Nelson does leave this safety room. That is a big loss there in that safety room, as Keenan Nelson definitely could have been a very talented player. Only 9 tackles for him last season, but nonetheless, still a loss in that secondary. So secondary, not a lot of pieces coming in through the transfer portal in the cornerback room, so you're going to have to rely on O'Donnell Fortune, Judge Collier, and Emery Floyd to play corner. In the safety room, you have Jalen Kilgore, DQ Smith, Nick Imanwari, and David Spaulding, who all of them can be very, very solid players, and all of them have been very solid players in the past. Imanwari, 8 pass defended, 2 interceptions last year. Fortune had 6 pass defended, 2 interceptions last season. Both of them were top 10 tacklers. Kilgore and Smith were top 10 tacklers for this team last year. You got a lot of talent in this defensive back room is what I'm trying to say. And kickers are people too, so I'm going to show them some love. Mitch Jeter is gone through the transfer portal. Last season was that primary place kicker for South Carolina, so Kai Kroger is going to be returning to this team, while you have a freshman in Mason Love who's projected to do the kicking duties for the Gamecocks in 2024. Okay, problems with this defense last season. Only 21 sacks. Sure, that broke the 20 number, but you want to maybe get 25 to 30 sacks in a season. That's a pretty solid defensive line. The secondary struggled at times to defend the pass, and this was not a team that forced a ton of turnovers. Yeah, they forced 17 turnovers last year, but if I remember right, I think their turnover margin was pretty close to flat last season. I could have that number completely mixed up in my head, but this defense, they've added some good talent through the transfer portal. They have some good returning pieces. I expect them to take a step up in ways in 2024. We'll see if that leads to overall improvement from the Gamecock defensive unit. Quickly diving on into their schedule. Any game at home will be underlined, while any game on the road is in italics. That's that slanted text. Any game in green, like the one you see here against Old Dominion, I think they're going to be able to win the first game of the season pretty easily, while Old Dominion does have some good players. Also, some notable guys leave through the transfer portal. Any game in yellow is going to be a close competitive game, but I still see the Gamecocks being able to win, while any game in red is a loss, as their second game of the year, I think, will be. I think they lose to the Kentucky Wildcats. Now, first off, before I start really diving in and predicting the schedule, this is a tough schedule. You have a lot of very tough teams here, and you especially have a lot of really, really good teams that you have to play at home, and some games on the road that you would probably rather have those games at home, like Kentucky, like Vanderbilt. Again, going on the road and playing Kentucky, I think it's going to be tough. Brock Vandagriff could have a really good season for that Kentucky team. They loaded up on some nice pieces through the transfer portal. There are a lot of good pieces coming back, and most notably, Mark Stoops is back after some rumors that he may go to Texas A&M, that Mark Stoops, of course, being that head coach. Kentucky's got a lot of nice pieces, and while I think they see their up and downs this year, I think one of their ups is beating the South Carolina Gamecocks here in week 2. And LSU, I think, is going to be a really talented team this year. I don't see South Carolina beating the LSU Tigers. I really like this Tigers team. Garrett Nussmeier is finally going to get his time to shine after he has been patient and stuck with this LSU program. You don't see many guys do that anymore with all the chaos and everything of the transfer portal, but Garrett Nussmeier has stuck it out. He's going to get his time, and yes, there are a lot of weapons leaving that team offensively, some defensively as well. Blake Baker's coming in to be the defensive coordinator. Harold Perkins has one of the best has an upside to be one of the best defensive players in the entire country, even though that game is at home. And while South Carolina can keep it close, I got the Tigers winning that one. You should win that game in week 4 against Akron, not a very good team out of the Mid-American Conference. And then you have to play the Ole Miss Rebels, the Alabama Crimson Tide, and the Oklahoma Sooners. Oklahoma definitely the most winnable game in that stretch, but and look, you get the extra week to prepare for Ole Miss at home, but I really like this Ole Miss team this season. I don't think they have a very good record on the road against South Carolina, but I'm still going to pick the Rebels right here. Why? Well, most notably, Antoine Wells, the former wide receiver at South Carolina who got hurt last year. If he can stay healthy for the Ole Miss Rebels, they got Jackson Dart coming back, and yes, Quinshon Judkins is gone, but there's still a lot of talent in that running back room. The wide receiver room is loaded, and they were one of the teams that hit it out of the park in the transfer portal. The defense is going to continue to take steps up. I love Lane Kiffin's team this season. I think they can make a deep postseason run, and I think Ole Miss beats South Carolina in week 7. I don't foresee the South Carolina team going on the road and beating the Alabama Crimson Tide. While Alabama may not have Nick Saban, they're still going to live up to the Alabama standard because they have Kalen DeBoer. He's been a winner everywhere he's gone. I do not think that's going to change once he makes the transition over to Tuscaloosa this year. His quarterback that played for Nick Saban last year, Jalen Milroe, is coming back. Yes, they lose a ton of pieces, including stud freshman safety last year in Caleb Downs. Now he's going over to play for Ryan Day. There's a ton of talent on that team. Do not underestimate Alabama this year, and South Carolina's got to go on the road to play that one. And I think they lose to the Oklahoma Sooners here as well. Now, Oklahoma, what are we going to see from them as now that the calendar's turned over to July, they are officially a member of the SEC. But for this Oklahoma Sooners team, I love what they have, especially offensively. I expect the defense to take a step up as a whole. But talking about what they have offensively, I think Jackson Arnold's going to be really, really good, especially if he can get that turnover problem figured out that we saw in that bowl game. He's got a ton of returning weapons and a transfer in Deion Burks coming over from Purdue that I think is going to be excellent. Oklahoma's got a really good offense. I just don't see South Carolina's defense keeping up, and that's a win for me for the Sooners. Okay, you have another very winnable game coming up here at home against Texas A&M. But I think you'll lose this one too. Texas A&M has Mike Elko coming in there, and especially if Connor Weigman can figure out what he needs to do with the quarterback position in order to get some consistent play from him. A&M's got a lot of good offensive pieces. They got some good defensive pieces. Yes, they lose some transfers. They got some really good players coming into that program as well. I think this Texas A&M team is overdue for a solid season since, well, they've just gone through disappointing season after disappointing season under Jimbo Fisher. I think Mike Elko is ready to win right away, and while this is a game that I could see South Carolina winning, I am not predicting as such. However, you should be able to get a win on the road against the Vanderbilt Commodores. Now, while this is a game that I could see South Carolina, having a little trouble with, this is one game right here where I finally feel like South Carolina is overall the better team. Now, maybe you could say that about Kentucky. Maybe you could say that about the Texas A&M Aggies, even though a lot of people have the Aggies in their top 25, myself included. This is the one game here in SEC play where you feel like, okay, South Carolina is absolutely the more talented team, and I think they win that road game against Vanderbilt. They lost some transfers as well. That's definitely going to hurt them in SEC play. You got to come back home and play the Missouri Tigers, and I got to tell you, I like this Tigers team a lot too this year. Yes, I know, Blake Baker, that defensive coordinator, is gone. What's Missouri's defense going to look like? That'll be interesting. But as long as they have Brady Cook, as long as they have Luther Burden, and a lot of those other wide receiver weapons they were able to supplement great in the loss for Cody Schrader. They got two very good running backs coming over from the Sun Belt Conference in Marcus Carroll and Nate Noel to be that running back 1-2 instead of having a true 1 in Cody Schrader. You kind of have a 1A, 1B situation there. I really like this Tigers team overall. I think Eli Drinkwitz has done a phenomenal job, and Missouri will beat South Carolina this season. They should pick up their 4th win of the year against Wofford, and getting Clemson at home would have been nice, but you had that last year, and I think you lose to Clemson on the road. I expect Cade Klubnik and Garrett Riley to take a jump from where they were in year one into year two. This Clemson defense is going to take a step up back towards the elite ranks of college football, and Clemson will be one of the teams in the ACC to watch out for this season, which leads me to 4-8 for the South Carolina Gamecocks. Now, I have to be honest with all of you fine people out there. 4-8 is not the record I want to give the South Carolina team. It really isn't, because I like a lot of the talent on this team. I think Sellers can be a really good quarterback. I think they supplemented really well, especially offensively through the transfer portal. And this is going to be a very fun and interesting team to watch this year. And while 4-8, I don't think should put Frank Beamer on the hot seat, there probably are going to be some discussions that begin to happen. Look, I think this is a South Carolina team that's got a lot of good talent that just runs into a hard schedule. So 4-8 is what I got for the Gamecocks this year. But I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. I want you to remember to play hard but tailgate harder. And next up, we'll talk about the Northwestern Wildcats. Goodbye.